Wasn't it West Side Connection chain?
Yeah.
And they held it up. I think Be Real held it up at a concert. So it was actually churning into potentially a bad situation.
I guess Solo knocked out Cube and took his West Side Connection chain.
Be Real put it on and hold it all up into the crowd. Crowd go crazy. They go bananas off of it.
And we're like, well, let's take pictures with it.
Rap beefs have always been brutal, but few moments shook the West Coast like this one. It was a moment that put a lot of rap fans against each other. The night Cypress Hill didn't just clap back at Ice Cube, they paraded his stolen chain like a trophy.
It was a pretty interesting time because, you know, it created a lot of split here in LA between black and brown, you know.
Now it wasn't even Cypress Hill who snatched it. The man who took Cube's chain, the man who held it up like a prize in front of thousands, was someone Cube once considered a friend.
He came off so cool that we ended up getting so cool that I was on his porch with him at his mama house.
Solo, a former ally turned rival, knocked Cube down and yanked the West Side Connection chain right off his neck.
Knocked him down, knocked him out, woke him back up, whooped on his ass. Somehow his chain fell in my hand.
And then, he took it straight to a Cypress Hill concert at the House of Blues, where Be Real, one of Cube's loudest critics at the time, held it up for the crowd.
Be Real put it on and hold it all up into the crowd. Crowd go crazy. They go bananas off of it.
And we're like, well, let's take pictures with it.
Flashbulbs popped. The audience lost its mind. The images spread like wildfire. This wasn't just an insult. This was a message. A robbery not just of jewelry, but of respect, of reputation, and of power. And when Ice Cube homies met with Be Real homies in Mexico, it almost turned into a full-blown war.
My homies and B homies, like we ran into each other in, I think Rosarito or some Mexico, you know what I'm saying? And you know, it could have got serious.
How did they make a comeback from this? Let's talk about it. It started with a missed opportunity. Be Real, Cypress Hill's frontman, was supposed to be in Cube's cult classic film Friday. He was up for the role of the angel dust-smoking Mexican homie, but his manager double-booked him on a European tour.
Originally, I was supposed to be in that movie, but our manager f***ed around and booked dates for us, you know, in Europe, so I couldn't be in the movies.
No Friday cameo, no on-screen smoke session with Chris Tucker. To make up for it, Cypress Hill offered Cube a track for the film, a peace offering if you will. Cube took it. Everything seemed smooth. But then, the studio session that would turn friends into foes came. When Ice Cube swung by the studio to check out the song Cypress Hill made for Friday, it wasn't just a business meeting. They were homies. So they linked up, vibing and playing music for each other.
We've been working on our album. You want to hear a couple of songs, you know? And he was like, oh, hell yeah, let's do it.
And that's when Be Real and his crew played Cube, a track called Throw Your Set in the Air. It was meant to be Cypress Hill's next big single, and Cube was feeling it, maybe a little too much.
The last song we played him was Throw Your Set in the Air, which was set to be our single. And he really liked that song. And he was like, hey man, what are you guys gonna do with that song? Let me have that song for the movie.
Fast forward a few months, Cypress Hill is out on tour, and their phones start blowing up with calls from the streets. Friends and homies back home called to ask, yo, did y'all give that Throw Your Set in the Air joint to Ice Cube? Confused, they're like, nah, why? And that's when they get the news.
You know, asking us actually if we had given that Throw Your Set song to Ice Cube. We're like, nah, we didn't give him that song. What are you talking about? And they're like, well, we just heard it on the radio. How could you just hear it on the radio? We haven't even turned this record, you know, it's not out yet for anybody to hear.
Cube dropped a track called Friday, the theme song for his movie, and something about it sounded eerily familiar. The flow, the chorus, a slight variation, but the DNA was all there. Cypress Hill's hook had gone. Throw your set in the air, wave it around like you just don't care. Cubes, throw your neighborhood in the air like you just don't care.
What the chorus was a variation of what our chorus was. Our shit was throw your set in the air, wave it around like you just don't care. Where his chorus was, oh yeah, throw your neighborhood in the air like you don't care.
Different words, but the cadence, identical. Cypress Hill wasn't having it. Be Real and his crew felt betrayed. Cube had been a homie. someone they respected, someone who had championed them when they were on the come-up. Now they felt like he had taken their creativity and repackaged it as his own. When they confronted him about it, Cube denied everything. He said he wasn't a biter. It was all just a coincidence.
He goes, man, I wouldn't steal from my friends, man. I mean, I love you guys, man. I'm a big fan of you guys. I love you guys. I wouldn't steal from my friends.
But Cypress Hill wasn't buying it. And when diplomacy failed, they did what any self-respecting rap group would do in the 90s. They took it to wax. That's when they made No Rest for the Wicked, a full-on diss track aimed straight at Cube's head. The message was clear. He was a thief, a fraud, a fake. And if there was one thing Cypress Hill wasn't going to do, it was let themselves be played for suckers.
We were at a point where we were never, ever gonna let ourselves look weak to no one. Not to anyone, even if it was Ice Cube.
The song hit hard, and Cube didn't take it lightly. Ice Cube had a reputation. This was the guy who obliterated NWA with No Vaseline. He wasn't about to take disrespect lying down. His response was West Side Connection. His newly formed trio with Mac 10 and WC fired back with King of the Hill, a scathing diss aimed directly at Cypress Hill. It was a full-scale war now, no turning back.
But you guys responded, what, King of the Hill?
Yeah.
You were on that?
Yeah, I was on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You took some shots at Cypress?
The whole crew.
The whole crew.
Yeah.
Fans started picking sides. Some rolled with Cube, the legend who had already proven his dominance in rap beef. Others stood with Cypress Hill, the underdogs fighting to defend their name.
Obviously, we feel we came up on the better end of that, and I think a lot of people recognize that we did. Some people that love Ice Cube would say he on us, so I guess it's a matter of opinion.
But here's where things took a turn. The studio beef wasn't the only thing brewing. A wild card suddenly got involved. Sean D. Solo Fonteno. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because years later, he'd be the voice of Franklin in Grand Theft Auto V. But back in the 90s, he was a street dude with a serious reputation. Solo was a product of Watts, raised in the kind of trenches that molded men into either legends or statistics. He was cut from the same cloth as Cube, a street-certified hustler with a sharp tongue and something to prove. And for a while, they were tight. Their relationship started because they had matching Suzuki Jeeps. That's what first sparked the connection. Solo had one, Cube had one, and in the unwritten code of the streets, that was enough to start a conversation.
He had a Suzuki Jeep and I had one. He had a gray one back in the days. He had Jerry curl and everything, and I ran into him, and I was like, oh, dude from NWA.
Soon enough, that conversation became a friendship. Cube wasn't some rap messiah to Solo. He was just another dude, one who still kicked it on his mama's porch, still cracked jokes while playing with his son. It was a bond built in the simplest way. Real recognize real. But when it came to the industry, things got complicated. When Cube left NWA, he started building something new. Lynch Mob Records, Street Knowledge Productions. Cube was setting up his empire, and Solo saw the vision. He thought he was part of the blueprint. Hell, Cube had made it seem that way, bringing Solo around, letting him soak up the energy of the studio, the meetings, the moves.
I used to go up there with him and stuff, and he used to be like, man, I got this deal through East West.
That was when Solo introduced Cam. Cam was family to Solo, not by blood, but by bond. They had come up together, ran the streets together. And when Cube started showing interest in Cam, Solo was the one vouching for him.
Cam is like family. We're not blood cousins, but you know how it is when you kids, man.
Right.
You grow up with somebody that's your cousin or that's your brother.
You gotta hear my boy, Solo had pressed. He's fire. Cube listened, and Cube agreed.
I always be telling him, man, I got this dude named Cam, man. He like my cousin, he fire, man. You gotta hear him, man. And he was like, I will, Solo, I will.
Then Cube signed Cam. And Solo was left standing outside the deal watching the door shut in his face. To Cube, it was just business. The label wanted Cam. Solo wasn't part of the equation. But to Solo, it was betrayal. How do you break bread with a man, sit on his porch, laugh with his kid, and then leave him out when the real money comes in?
At that time, I thought he was putting us on, he was finna give me a contract too, so I remember walking in there and I was like, man, where my contract at?
That kind of move didn't sit right with him. It wasn't about rap, it was about respect. Resentment is a quiet thing. It creeps in through the cracks, settles in your chest, and turns memories into ammunition. Every time Solo saw Cube making moves, dropping albums, building his empire, that bitterness twisted a little deeper. He wasn't some kid with a dream. He was in the streets, getting his by any means necessary. And Cube had played him. So when the Cypress Hill beef started, Solo saw an opportunity. He wasn't about to be the one left standing in Cube's shadow any longer. If Cube was at war, then maybe it was time to pick a side. Not out of loyalty to Cypress Hill. Solo wasn't about to pretend he had some deep allegiance there, but against Cube, that was a war he could get behind. And when the moment came, he took it. Depending on who you asked, the fight was legendary. It was a quiet LA night, the kind where the streets hum low, the city lights flicker, and trouble lurks at every intersection. On that night, Ice Cube was behind the wheel, minding his business. Or at least, that's what he thought. Maybe he's rolling through thoughts of his next move. Maybe he's just trying to get home. But fate had other plans. At a traffic light, another car pulled up. Solo got out of the car, and things moved fast from there. According to Solo, words flew, sharp, clipped, laced with all the venom that had been building up from the feud between Ice Cube and Cypress Hill. But words only go so far. In an instant, fists started flying. This was a raw, street-level, no-rules brawling. And in the chaos, Cube takes the hit. In one clean shot, Cube dropped.
Knocked him out, woke him back up, whooped on his.
The man behind West Side Connection, the man who built his legacy off of being untouchable, is now sprawled out on the pavement. And if that wasn't enough, Cube's prized possessions, his West Side Connection chain and Rolex watch, ended up in Solo's hands. Did Solo snatch them? Did they fall in the heat of the moment? That's the million-dollar question. And Solo, he played it cool, shrugs it off with a smirk. I don't know how that happened.
Somehow his chain fell in my hand. I don't know how it got in my hand, but it fell in my hand. Then all of a sudden his Rolex started jumping off and coming into my hand. I don't know how that happened.
Solo wasn't about to write a song about that moment, yes, but the streets, they never forgot. The story took on a life of its own. Did Solo really lay Cube out? Did he really walk off with his chain? The details blurred with time, but one thing was certain. Solo had made a statement. Now you'd think that was enough for Solo, but no. He went ahead and took Ice Cube's jewelry to the House of Blues. The House of Blues was packed. Cypress Hill was in full force. The crowd electric with energy, smoke thick in the air. And then, as if scripted, Solo stepped onto the stage with Ice Cube's West Side Connection chain draped around his neck like a king flaunting the spoils of war. The crowd didn't just cheer, they erupted. Be Real, always one for theatrics, took the chain, hoisted it high, and let the moment marinate. The flashes of cameras immortalized it. The chain shimmering under the stage lights, a stark symbol of Cube's loss.
People that's not hood and not in the streets like I was at that time, bro, took it like, oh, you just beat the Don Mecca up. You just robbed the Don Mecca. You just did this to the Don Mecca. Because people look at Cube as, you know, he's the gangster.
It wasn't just jewelry anymore. It was a trophy and a statement. A declaration of war. The beef was no longer an industry spat over verses and subliminal dices. No, this was raw. This was street. A chain wasn't just a fashion accessory in this world. It was respect, credibility, power, and Cube's chain, that was the West Side Connection chain. A representation of everything Cube had built with his clique. Now it was draped over the enemy's shoulders, paraded like a banner in a rival's camp. Cube had taken an L, and everyone knew it. Worse, they had receipts. The photo of Be Real holding up Cube's chain spread like wildfire. Back then, before social media could turn moments into memes in real time, this kind of humiliation moved through the streets like legend. The whispers got louder. The rumors twisted the knife even deeper. Did Cube really get dropped that bad? Did Solo really run off with the chain? And if so, why wasn't Cube doing anything about it? Meanwhile, Solo wasn't content with just the spectacle. He was making his rounds, taking the trophy with him wherever he went. That chain wasn't just proof of his victory, it was bait, a challenge. And Solo had no problem taking it straight to Cube's front yard. He went to Cube's neighborhood, chain dangling, offering the ultimate proposition. Cube could have it back, if he was willing to fight for it. One more round. No crew, no entourages, no bodyguards, just fists, just them.
I used to wear it all the time and didn't worry about nobody taking it from me. And I was like, he can have his chain back, bro, as long as he come back and fight me again.
Through it all, Cube was silent. Not a diss track, not a statement, not a threat, just silence, which in itself said a lot. In the rap game, where reputation meant everything, a move like this could be seen as a death blow. But Cube wasn't just a rapper, he was a businessman. He knew how this worked. A reckless decision, one made purely on pride, could be a career-ending move. So instead of taking Solo's bait, he stayed quiet, let the storm rage on without him. And while that might have been the smart move in the long run at the moment, it only fueled the flames. To the streets, silence looked like surrender. To Solo, it looked like confirmation. While Cube played the long game, Mac 10 served as a diplomat working in the background.
Mac 10 intervened in the middle of it and tried to squash it because I was just going everywhere with the chain on and was daring anybody to do anything.
This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about optics. Westside Connection had an image to maintain, and having their leader's chain in enemy hands was a stain that couldn't be ignored. It's funny that at first, Mac 10 was all in on the beef. He was ride or die for Cube, stepping into the fight without even fully understanding what sparked it.
I had never met Be Real, Muggs, Sin Dog, nobody from Cypress Hill. And they was blood. But I was with this, so I didn't give a.
But as tensions escalated beyond the mic into street-level confrontation, he started realizing this wasn't just about a song anymore. The internet even says the mafia was getting interested in the beef. Street beefs like this had a way of turning deadly, and Mac 10 knew that better than anyone. He worked out a deal. Solo would get paid, and the chain would be returned. Simple, clean, efficient.
Mac 10 tell me he gonna get me all this stuff, he gonna give me this, and it took too long to where I start pressing Mac 10 like, well, you better get my chain back. I ended up getting paid. Mac 10 ended up taking care of me, making sure it was straight.
Did that mean the L was erased? Not at all. The streets had already decided who won this battle, and it wasn't Cube. But with the chain back in his possession, the narrative could shift. The photos were still out there, but Cube had the final piece of the puzzle back. And in an era where perception was reality, that was enough to start rewriting history. But there was still unfinished business. Cube and Solo had to face each other one last time. The sit-down wasn't just about the chain, it was about settling the energy between them. Cube showed up wearing dark glasses, a calculated move to hide the bruises from their last fight.
He was filming the Jamie Foxx show and Players Club at the time, and he had these black eyes, because I didn't know I did him that bad because I spazzed out. And he had these big black glasses on.
But the tension in the air was undeniable. The table between them shook. Cube's barely contained frustration making his presence heavy in the room. Solo, for all his guts, saw the bigger picture. This wasn't about chains anymore. It wasn't even about pride. It was about two men who had once been friends, letting a mix of business and ego drive them into chaos. That's when Solo made a rare admission. He was wrong. Not about the fight, not about defending Cypress Hill, but about the way things had spiraled. They had let politics and loyalty turn into something personal, something that didn't need to go as far as it did. Cube, still simmering, didn't speak much, but in the end, they shook hands. The war was over. Cube even extended an olive branch and offered Solo a role, a place back in the fold. But by then, it was too late. Solo's loyalty to Cam ran too deep, and Cube had already made it clear where he stood when he signed one but not the other. So, Solo walked.
My loyalty to Cam was worth more than signing and make more money now.
Now, even though the fight with Solo was over, the beef with Cypress Hills was still very much on. So Mac 10 picked up the phone again and reached out to Be Real. The first real conversation wasn't about music, it was about survival. Before anybody gets really hurt, Mac said, we gotta squash this.
Mac 10 called me and, we decided, hey, listen, this before anybody gets really hurt, because we got the type of people that this will happen. We decided, hey, let's squash it.
Be Real listened. He wasn't the kind of man to back down, but he also wasn't a fool. He respected Mac 10's call for peace. And when Mac floated the idea of speaking to Cube directly, Be Real didn't hesitate. The only condition was that Cube had to call him himself. No middlemen, no whispers behind the scenes.
I said, yeah, he's just got to call me like you called me, and we'll strike all the down.
And so it happened. Ice Cube and Be Real talked. They laid it all out. The misunderstandings, the bitterness, the pride that had turned friends into rivals. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And in the end, they made a pact. No more negative words. No more sneak disses. No more letting the past dictate their future. It wasn't just for them. It was for the people who rode for them. The ones who might get caught in the crossfire. The world didn't know the war was over until Cube did something unthinkable. He invited Be Real to a show.
There was a show he had at it's called One Oak now, but it was all maybe Billboard Live or the Key Club then. He told me to come down to that show.
At first, the crowd didn't understand what they were witnessing. Be Real walking into a venue full of Cube's people alone. It didn't make sense. But then he stepped onto the stage and the place erupted. The beef was dead, and the hip-hop world took a collective breath of relief. But it wasn't just about peace. It was about proving that reconciliation wasn't weakness. They didn't just stop fighting, they started building. The first brick was a song. Shaquille O'Neal, of all people, played Peacemaker, putting Cube and Be Real on a track called Super Friends, signaling to the world that the past was behind them. Then Warren G brought them together again, first on a track, then on a remix, reinforcing what had already been set in motion.
We eventually worked on a record with Shaq, then eventually on a record with Warren G.
And as the years passed, the collaboration didn't stop. Ice Cube and Cypress Hill, once locked in one of hip-hop's most personal wars, found themselves side by side on tour. They shared stages, rhymes, and the kind of knowing glances that only come from men who have survived battle together. Social media wasn't around back then to document every step, so when fans saw them standing shoulder to shoulder, they were stunned. But it was real. For Ice Cube and Cypress Hills, the beef seemed to make them grow an even stronger bond. But for Solo, it was quite different. Years later, Solo would look back and wonder, had he played it wrong? Cube had the connections, the deals, the power to change lives, and he had been ready to bring Solo in. But pride is a hell of a drug, and at the time, all Solo saw was a man who had once been his brother turned into just another industry player. However, he recently said in an interview that he wouldn't mind working with Cube. "We both hustlers, homie, it is what it is," he told TMZ. "He's from South Central, I'm from South Central. That shuz over with, man. Holla at ya, boy." Because in the end, the streets never forget, but sometimes they forgive.